So I was laying on the couch. I was sick as a dog, and I just started bawling. And my mom came over to me, and I told her what was going on, and she was in complete shock. I'll never forget the look on her face.
Welcome back to Other People's Lives. I'm Joe Santagato.
I'm Greg Dybec.
For anyone out there that would like to be a guest on our show, don't hesitate to hit us up. Our email is oplpodcast@gmail.com.
Today, we're speaking to a woman who reached out with the subject line, "I sent my grandfather to prison at 8 years old." And her message says that her grandfather molested her and all of her girl cousins, that she was the only one to break the silence in her family, ultimately sending her grandfather to prison. And then she goes on to say that she went to see him on his deathbed to speak her mind. So we're going to hear the whole story from her, from when she was young to eventually visiting her grandfather on his deathbed. Thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. And, we just always like to say for topics like this, we really appreciate you choosing our platform and, your willingness to share a story that I'm sure isn't easy to talk about with us. So thank you again.
Definitely. Yeah, I've never shared my story on any platform, so it's kind of exciting.
So can you take us back to, I guess it's 8-year-old you or, a little bit younger, I think before the events of you breaking the silence about your grandfather, and even before anything happened with your grandfather, like, can you just talk about who he was as a person, some of the early memories that you had in your relationship with him?
Yeah. So everything started before I could even remember. So I was too young, maybe a baby, toddler, I'm not really sure, up until I was about 8. And, I have a lot of fond memories with him. He lived a couple hours south of, where we were. So we saw them, holidays, and randomly my grandparents would come up and visit. And like, I have tons of memories of like going on bike rides and hanging out and reading books and, typical things that a grandparent would do with a young kid. But there's also a lot of horrible ones that go along with it.
Yeah. So I guess, when did, this sort of start, do you remember when it first started happening? And also, when did you figure out that it was happening to all of your cousins as well?
I don't remember when it first started. I was too young. And then I guess, when you're that young and you start to looking back now, I'm like, at first you didn't really think that it was anything because you're so little and, you don't know that bad things are happening to you until, I would say maybe I was 6 or 7, maybe leading up to right before I came out about it. I started realizing that my sister and my older cousin had stopped. Like, they said, I don't want this to happen to me anymore. Da, 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 da. So I kind of started realizing like, oh, maybe this isn't right. And I also started realizing that he was being really sneaky all the time. And that was kind of what started the ball rolling, where I started kind of feeling guilty about what was going on. And I didn't really know what I was guilty for because I was so young. I didn't know what it was.
So you can share as much as you're comfortable with, but just to get a sense, what was happening exactly? And, at that age, 6 or 7, do you remember some of the first things that were those red flags in your mind that like, oh, this probably isn't a proper interaction?
Yeah. So one memory that sticks out is I had jumped on his back. He was giving me a piggyback ride, and he was reaching around and feeling me underneath, and the whole family was around, but just little sneaky things like that. And then another time, this happened many times, but we would be up, my sister and I had bunk beds, and we were up on the top bunk, and he had a blanket over us while we were reading a book, and he was doing his thing. and I didn't even know. And then my mom walked in, and I remember he like freaked out and like pulled the blanket over us. And that was like the first time that I was like, oh, he's like scared about this. He got really anxious about it. So maybe this isn't right, because that was weird. And then he would have like me and my younger cousin like do things to him too. And then I remember my cousin was, I think she was maybe two years younger than me. And she was kind of the same way that I was. Like, we didn't really know like this was bad. And then I kind of started realizing, like, because he would have her like touch his privates, have me. And then I kind of started realizing, like, this is not right, because nobody else is ever around. And anytime that someone would even remotely come near, he would freak out. So obviously this isn't right, because he's freaking out.
Did you ever talk with your cousins about this, or is it kind of just like an unspoken thing between you guys?
It's kind of an unspoken thing. I guess I talked to my younger cousin a little bit more about it, because we were the ones that were closest in age. And then my sister and I, we really don't talk about it very much.
So when did you start thinking about telling your family and coming out with this?
It was, I think that they came up to visit, and I remember we had like our pool out and everything, and he was in this room, and my cousin and I had gone in there to change into our swimsuits or whatever. And then things got weird, and I went out, and he asked me to go get my sister to come in. And so I went out and told my sister, I was like, hey, Grandpa wants to see you in there. And she was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. And so that's when I kind of really, once my sister said it, I really was like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this either. And so then I kind of pulled away. And after they left, I think I got the flu really bad. And when I was little, I mean, I guess probably still to this day, when I get really sick, I get super emotional. And so I just cry a bunch. And I also, like when I was younger, I would just confess anything. Like if I had lied about anything in my home, I would get sick and I'd be like, oh, Mom and Dad, I did this. I brought mud into the house in my shoes. You know, I would feel so guilty. And so I was laying on the couch. I was sick as a dog, and I just started bawling. And my mom came over to me, and I told her what was going on, and she was in complete shock. I'll never forget the look on her face I told her.
Did you tell her that it was happening to you, or did you tell like he's doing this to all of us?
I told her that it was all of us. And I think there was, from what I can remember, there's at least 6 of us that I know. It was my younger cousin, her sister, me and my sister, and then 1 or 2 of my older cousins.
Wow. So you have never had a conversation with your sister or like any of the other ones besides the cousin who's like close in your age about any of this stuff happening like to this day?
Nope. Maybe. No, not even to my sister. No, not really.
Wow. So you told your mom, and did you feel like she believed you right away?
100%. Yeah. That is like one thing that I was so, like, to this day, I'm so thankful that my parents were so quick they believed me, and they didn't doubt me, and they just took the bull by the horns and dealt with it. And we then proceeded to police and counselors and all kinds of stuff.
Was it your mother's father?
Yes.
Wow. So, I mean, that also kind of like immediately telling her like, hey, this is happening to me, and her just being like fucking riding for her daughter, which is awesome, and being like, absolutely, I believe you. Like, let's go figure this out. So right after that conversation, what was her initial reaction? Did she say anything to you? Did she go and confront him?
She did not confront him, but my dad did. She was shocked. I remember she immediately ran into her bedroom and told my dad. And my dad called my grandpa, And I didn't hear the conversation, but he told me he threatened to kill him. He was going to go down there, drive down 2 hours south and go and kill him that night. But they called the police. I don't know if they called the police that night. It's a little bit blurry. But after that, then the police came and there was investigations, and they brought out their little recording thing, and I sat down, little 7, 8 years old, and they asked me a bunch of graphic questions, and yeah.
Wow. Do you remember your feeling at the time once these events got set in motion and something was being done about this? Do you remember feeling a relief potentially, or were you kind of just scared? Or I've heard stories of even people feeling like guilty now that they've kind of given this information.
Definitely a mixture of relief and scared, because since I was so young and I didn't really know the extent of how bad it was, I think that made me, when the police came and everything, I was like, oh my gosh, this is huge. Like, what is happening? Like, he's going to go to jail. And that kind of freaked me out. But at the same time, I was like, I mean, if he's doing this, like, maybe he should go to jail, you know?
Yeah, totally. And ultimately, how did that happen? How did he end up in prison?
After they interviewed me, my sister, and I don't know exactly what happened with my other cousins. But after that, then my parents got a lifelong restraining order from him, from me and my sisters, or me and my sister. And then I was so young, I don't know like the court process and all that kind of stuff, but he ended up only going to prison for a year. And then he got released out on like a pedophile like rehab thing for a couple years after that. And then from then on, he had, since he was a registered pedophile, he couldn't be around kids for life after that.
Wow.
Jeez.
Is he still alive?
No, he actually passed away about 6 years ago.
So, yeah, you're so young at the time, and I'm sure it's hard to process some of those emotions. And, you know, you grow up, there's a restraining order, so you're not seeing this person, which I imagine is just so difficult too. I mean, a grandparent is supposed to be one of the most trustworthy people in your life when you're young. So can you just kind of walk us through as you got older? I know you said that you still, you know, haven't really talked to your sisters or your cousins, but how did you sort of deal with this as you really were able to wrap your head around what happened to you as a child?
You know, I think there are so many times where I've become angry about it or, you know, whatever, but my parents really helped guide us through this, even though they had never been through anything like this. They were so supportive, and like, they always told me, like, you know, this isn't something that you want to talk about with everybody, but if you do want to share it, you can. Like, they never tried to silence me in any way. I think it's just kind of an uncomfortable thing to talk about, which is why my sister and I just don't really talk about it. Not like I can't talk about it with her. I just choose not to, because I don't want to bring up horrible memories. But navigating through, I mean, even still to this day, like, because of him, I have insane trust issues with men, particularly. Like, I can remember when I was in like Sunday school as a kid, there was this guy and his wife that taught the class, and they were great people, you know, looking back, nothing to be afraid of. But every time I would step foot in there, if the husband was in there, I would just start screaming and crying. And my parents would have to calm me down and say, it's okay, you're safe. And then even being around, like, if I had a sleepover with a friend and her dad drove me home, that would just throw me into a tizzy. Like, I couldn't handle it. I was like, no, you have to be there. Your mom has to be there. Like, some woman has to be here. It gave me such a bad fear of older men. And then coming into high school and dating and all that kind of stuff, no matter what it was, it's not like I was ever really afraid of being sexually assaulted again, because I feel like that also gave me a lot of strength. but I just couldn't trust anybody, no matter what it was. Like, if you tell me something, I may not believe it. And I just don't people.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine that. And I was going to ask if you ever felt like there was this thing, now there's a lasting impact, and it makes sense that there would be some trust issues there. Also, I totally blanked, but you said that, in the beginning we talked about how you went out of your way to talk to him on his deathbed, correct?
Yes, I did.
Was that the first time that you had spoken to him since this all happened?
Yeah, since the last time they had come to visit before I got sick and told my parents.
So I was going to ask, why did you want to go talk to him, and what did you say?
So he was in an old folks home. And we knew that he was going to be dying soon. And my parents had gone down to visit. They had actually been down a few times to visit him before that. And they called me and said, this is it. He's going to pass away. And they said, if there's anything that you want to say to him, then we think now is the time. But if you don't want to say anything, that's totally okay. They said that maybe it would help give you closure. But like I said, my parents have been so supportive through everything, and really just let me kind of guide my way through it. And so I decided, I was like, I think I would like to go down and see him and tell him what's up. And so I went to the old folks home, and I remember walking down the hallway, and I just stopped and I just started bawling, and because I'm about to see this person face to face for the first time since the last time he did something to me. And my dad just held me, and I just bawled, and he said, sorry, I'm crying. He was like, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. And I was like, no, I want to. So I went in there, and he used to have this cartoon Donald Duck voice that he would do. And so when I walked in, he started doing that immediately, and I just froze. And I looked at him, and I was like, stop. Don't ever do that ever again. That's disgusting. I never want to hear that for the rest of my life. And then he just started sobbing and weeping. Like, I've never seen anybody cry like that. And he was hunched over and just had his head in his knees, just crying and crying. And I sat down on the bed next to him, and I just said, you really screwed me up. And he just kind of nodded in his tears. And I was like, I don't trust anybody because of you. And he was like, I know, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I said, sorry, it's not going to cut it. But I said, I do forgive you. I do. It's been a long time, but it's not really up to me to deal with you. It's up to God. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I left it.
How were you able to find forgiveness?
I think growing up, having faith is a whole different thing. If you don't know it, you don't know it. But if you do, you do. And in the Bible, it says to give everything up to God. And I didn't want to have that weigh on me for my entire life. I don't want me being molested as a child to define me forever and impact anything, because I have so many great things in my life. I've been so blessed, even though I've gone through a lot of shit. Not even just that, I've gone through a lot. And my blessings are so much more. And I firmly believe that people like that are mentally ill. And so I can choose to see that he's messed up, and that in order for me to move on and really see the blessings in my life, I have to be able to forgive. Not that I don't ever feel hurt by it or get mad about it, because forgiveness doesn't mean that you forget. But I'm able to see him as a broken person, and that even though he's broken, he didn't break me.
Wow. And can you also, talk about the impact of that moment, leaving that old folks home? Did you feel like a sense of relief where you feel like I'm a completely different person now? And like now where you are in your life, you know, you're pretty removed. You said it happened like 6 years ago. Do you think that was the right move? That was, you know, something that you needed to do?
I do think it was the right move. I'm glad that I did, because I did feel a sense of closure from that, and like being able to tell him like what you did really fucked us up. But I'm going to keep moving forward, and I'm going to be stronger than that, and letting him know like I'm good. And even though you broke me when I was a kid, I'm fine now, and I've got a great life. And I feel like that just, it empowered me in a way, but it also, like, it just gave me closure. I felt like I said what I needed to say. And I think that if he would have passed without me doing that, I think I would feel like there was unfinished business.
Do you feel like he was actually sorry, or is that not even important for your personal closure?
I do think he was actually sorry. I don't think someone can weep like that and not feel true remorse for what they've done.
Yeah.
And you said something interesting where you're like, these people are mentally ill. Do you think your experience with your grandfather, I guess, has sort of shaped the way that you think about, you know, I guess people who either have like addiction or, you know, are pedophiles or criminals or something like that, like having a firsthand experience? Do you think, you know, you have like a different point of view that is not necessarily how the world views those types of people?
Yeah, in a way, I guess it is a little bit more circumstantial, but yeah, with addiction, with pedophilia, with all that kind of stuff, you're messed up. You're messed up in the head, and I guess that's all I can say. I mean, with addiction, that's is a whole different aspect. But you know, you have this chemical going on in your brain that shifts the way that you think and the way that you do things, and yeah.
Yeah, well, I just always find it so powerful when you hear stories like this where someone is able to find forgiveness. And I think the way that you define forgiveness for yourself, and I think the distinction between being able to forgive but still allowing yourself to be hurt by the thing is really important. I think a lot of times it might be hard for people to find forgiveness because it has to feel like this ultimate, like, I am okay and I can't feel pain anymore. But that seems impossible. But, you know, for what you did and for you to get that off your chest and face him and, you know, tell him, but also have that moment to tell yourself that, again, like, this broken person has not broken you in the end, that's so powerful. And that's such an incredible thing that you were able to come to on your own.
Yeah, I think, I think the statistic is like 1 in 4 women will be sexually abused at some point in their life, which is like 25%. And so that's a vast majority of women that are having something along these lines happen to them. And I know that it is so hard for people to speak out. And I guess I'm thankful that I was so young to where I didn't really think about all of the ramifications. But I definitely encourage people who have gone through this or are going through it now to find someone that you can trust to tell it to, because it won't stop with just you. It will move on to the next person and the next person and the next person. And so if you can be that person that stops it, then you can save so many more people. Like, I actually just found out a few years ago that my older girl cousins, they had this happen to them, and they told their parents, and their parents didn't do anything about it. They talked to him. He said he would stop, and they just left it at that. And then he went on and did it to the rest of us. So if you can be the one that stands up for not only yourself, but for everyone after and before, then I pray that they have the strength to go and do that.
Jeez. Yeah. Wow.
I just want to say, like, you know, I know that you know this, you know, because of your experience, but it is truly amazing what you did, especially at the age of 8, you know, and even if it's not conscious at the time of knowing, you know, the impact that you're about to make by bringing this to your parents and them too, like just believing you and being like, all right, let's fucking handle this. You're right. Like you changed the course of, you know, all of the people's lives who were affected by this man, and your own, obviously, which is like incredible. And then to find it in yourself to, you know, deal with something so young, go through your entire life, and then get to the point where this man is on his deathbed and being like, I'm going to face him and I'm going to forgive him because I'm not carrying this around for the rest of my life. Like that is a laundry list of things that only a very strong person can achieve. And that's kind of why I was asking that question of like, you know, how is this, like, does this change your experience with like people who are criminals or addicts or whatever? I'm not trying to compare all those things, but these are things that would tear families apart. And, you know, if people don't have any experience with these people, it's hard to imagine, like, I would never forgive that person. I would never, you know, whatever, but dealing with it, having it actually happen to you, you know, it changes your experience and it makes you feel like, yeah, I'm not forgiving in a way that like, that makes me weak. It makes me strong to be able to be like, I'm good. I don't need to carry that around anymore. I'm stronger than this person thinks I am or whatever it is. And that's kind of why I was asking that question. And it's just very, you know, awesome to hear where you're at and where your head was at when you were doing all of this. And it, like I said, stemming from 8 years old when this is happening is just like incredible that you were able to, you know, figure all that out. It's like incredibly emotionally mature and just strong. Honestly, it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
I feel like, you know, forgiveness is not for the other person. I didn't have to tell him that I forgave him. I chose to. But forgiveness is really for yourself and for moving on in your life and not like, I mean, if I were to carry around all this anger, resentment, and bitterness forever, that's going to change the course of how I act in my life, how I treat other people. And I don't want that. And yeah, so.
Yeah. And your ability to heal from all this, which, you know, could be a lifelong process, but, also just want to say shout out to your parents too. And I know you mentioned it, but you know, I know we're hearing your perspective of this story, but for your parents, I think that's such an important side story in all of this for the support that they gave. And there's often someone else that can be a catalyst of change. If someone, you know, like yourself as a child speaks up and says, I was wronged, or this adult did something wrong. And there's so many people who will brush that off, like your cousin's parents. And, you know, it's just a reminder for anyone, if anyone in your life comes to you asking for help or saying they were wrong, like to really listen, to be attentive to that and not brush it off and not dismiss it, even if it's really hard to imagine it being true, that can make all the difference too. So it's just also really great to hear that you had such a strong support system around you to, you know, really listen to what you said and help make all this happen.
Yeah, I couldn't be more thankful for them. I mean, I hear stories all the time about people will say, oh yeah, this happened to me. And people are like, oh no, it didn't. And, you know, brush it off, like you said. And it's like, that kind of stuff should not be taken lightly ever.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes it's the subtlest hints too, you know, sometimes it's a friend saying, hey, I'm really sad, or, you know, and it's so easy to brush those things off because you don't want to think worst case scenario. But, you know, sometimes cry for helps can be screams, or they could be whimpers, and, you know, it's on us to pay attention to that,
and for
with the people we love.
Go against her own dad, you know.
Yeah. Wow.
That's gangster shit too. Like her daughter's being like, yo, it's your dad. And she's like, fuck my dad. Like, let's take him down. Like that's really cool. But we appreciate you coming on the show and being so honest and sharing this. I know that it's not the easiest thing in the world. And like Greg said in the beginning, like we appreciate you, you know, choosing our platform to tell this story. I do think that, you know, I meant every word that I said. I think it's incredibly amazing to hear how you've dealt with this, with something that happened to you when you were 8 years old. And now, you know, having so much distance from it and more understanding. I think that's important for people to hear because, like you said, I don't know the statistic, but you said 1 in 4 women are going to deal with some sort of sexual abuse, or I don't want to misquote what the stat is, but you know, something like that. So this will resonate. Like it will, you know, this does happen. Yes. And me and Greg can also tell you, we get a lot of emails from people that talk about being in a, you know, domestic violence or have being sexual assaulted or something like that. So, you know, there are people listening to this who have gone through, you know, something similar, maybe something not as bad as this, or maybe worse. But hearing how you've dealt with it and how you've overcome it and finding forgiveness and being able to move on with your life is incredibly inspiring. So we thank you for coming on and using the platform to tell your story.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. And I just want to give people strength to move on and be able to, you know, have a great life after, because you can have such a wonderful life, even though you've had some horrible shit happen to you. You know, look for those blessings. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I know you're not trying to be a spokesperson in this, and this is the first time you talked about it, but this episode will have an enormous impact. And it's so hard. It's hard for us. I know it's hard for the audience to hear these stories, but I think collectively as like the community of this show, like we know it's important to hear and not shy away from the fact that this happens, and it happens so often. But then to hear a story like yours and for the strength that you're able to give and the advice you're able to give, it just makes it worth it and easier to swallow. And this absolutely will have an impact on other people.
Good. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You guys too. All
right. Have a good one.
Me too. Bye.
Bye.
Honestly, just like an incredible story from, like, I mean, I don't want to, that's a weird way of saying, of opening up the thoughts, but like it's an incredible path to healing that this girl kind of went through. I keep honing in on something happening at 8 years old and then not speaking to this man and eventually getting to the point where this person's dying. I want to go and I want to face them. Like, that's just like gangster shit, honestly. And like you said, I mean, shout out to her parents. You know, we've on this show, we've heard so many horror stories of people speaking up and their parents just being like, all right, just go back to bed, or like, you know, whatever, not really dealing with it. The cousin, the parents being like,
and that stifles someone from ever speaking up again if it keeps happening. Yeah. It's so dangerous.
And talking to him, and he's going to be like, I'm not doing it anymore. I don't give a fuck if you do it anymore. You did it, you dumbass. Like, it's a wrap, you know? Like, that's crazy. So also, one thing that I wanted to say that I think is like incredibly powerful, and I think that like this is something that I've felt, but she was able to sort of verbalize, is like that power of forgiveness is huge. And I think that forgiveness has this what's the word? Like it gets a bad rep, or it gets this like, you know, for whatever reason, people associate it with weakness. You know, if you forgive someone, then they're just going to do it again. Or now you become a doormat or something like that. But it's not. It's actually not like that. You know, like if you actually forgive somebody, like no one has control over your life. You can't control how much something hurts. It will hurt. But you can control how you deal with that moving forward in your life. Eventually it won't hurt as much, maybe. But what you can control is like, I'm not going to like let this change me in a way of like, now I become a bitter person. Now I become this and that. There are some things that will have lasting effects for sure. But, you know, to keep your heart, you have to forgive. You have to forgive people. And you don't have to fuck with them and they should fucking go to jail and all that shit. But for you to be like, I'm not carrying this around anymore. Like that takes an insane amount of strength. And the fact that she was able to do that, 8 years old, never talking to this man, seeing him again in person on his deathbed when he's like crying and whatever, and just like staying strong and being like, I forgive you, but like also fuck you, kind of like in a way, is like incredible. And I think that's like the proper way, in my opinion, for certain things. Obviously some things are fucking unforgivable and, you know, some people fuck off for life. But, you know, in situations where you feel like I'm over this, So I can forgive you, but that doesn't mean that we get to be buddy anymore. Like, you go do your thing, but I just want you to know I'm not carrying it anymore. Like, there is a lot of strength in that. And it's just like amazing to hear that she's strong enough for this situation to be able to do that. I don't know if I would be able to do that, but I do think, like, I can hear this story and go, that is an incredibly strong person. To be able to do that is like incredible to me. So good for her. I mean,
yeah. And we've heard a version of this story so many times, unfortunately, but it's like the people who find the strength where some of the worst shit in the world could happen to them. Yeah. But I think that ties into the forgiveness factor too. It's like, this terrible event, the most negative thing in my life isn't going to define my life and define my character. And that's what she said. Like, her blessings are bigger than the negative shit. And when there's one single person who caused this negative shit, it's that forgiveness is just a release. Like, any power you had over me, you don't anymore.
Right.
I am fully in control. So yeah, incredible. She is insanely strong.
Bro, you hear stories where like someone's father gets murdered or something, and then the child forgives the killer. Yeah. And it's always this like emotional thing, and the person just feels so much better at being like, I don't, you know what I mean? I just don't want to like, you don't have to be a murderer in my life anymore. Like, you did a thing, whatever, how many years ago, whatever, blah, 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 and it was horrible. But like, and I'm not your fucking friend.
Well, yeah, like that. Yeah, I get that. Like, pinpointing that distinction is so key. I don't know why people look at that as like weakness, or that there's this thing like never forgive, but it's not for them. The forgiveness isn't for them. It's for yourself.
That's what I think it is. Like, people get that mixed up, because there are situations where it is for them. You're forgiving someone who made a blatant mistake, and you're like, all right, like if they do it again, like whatever. Like, so those little things, but like in bigger emotional things, it's like, bro, I'm not carrying this around. Like, yeah, you're good. Like, but like you've built a wall, and like, that's it. So like, you've hurt me, I forgive you, but you can't get to me anymore. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference. Is like, I'm cool with forgiving you because you can't get in now.
The forgiveness is like, I've put up these gates in a way, and I'm comfortable inside. Right. You stay outside.
Yeah. And like, I don't need to be mad. I don't need to be angry. I don't need to be anything, because I'm good. I'm protected from you, especially. So I forgive you for me. And then that's it. See you later.
Dude, there's so many things in life where like, you know how you would want to act in this situation. And some of us will never be confronted with that. And you hope you would have that type of strength and clarity. So it's just amazing to hear someone who who went through that. And wow. Well, we obviously wish her the best of luck in everything. And we really thank her for coming on. And, seems like she hasn't really spoken about that with anyone. So it's incredible that she chose.
By the way, one thing that I wanted to say at the end of this too is like, if something like this has happened to you, you don't need to forgive people. It's not a need. You know, like what she has done is incredible for a reason. But I don't think it's the only way to sort of deal with trauma or whatever. If it works for you, you know, the shit happened to you. You should deal with it the way that you know feels most comfortable, or whatever works for you. And obviously, this is case by case. But
yeah, I think it's incredible to hear in this case, because it was clear for her that would help her. Right. That is the path that she wanted to go. Yeah. And then she wasn't just swayed by like, oh, if I forgive, am I weak or anything like that? But yeah, I know you're not like being a spokesperson for forgiveness is the only way.
Yeah, no, because I'm not up here like saying that. Like I would probably be like, no, I'm gonna go visit him on his deathbed.
I would take a pillow.
Yeah, exactly. So like, fuck you, bro. But yeah, so your trauma, deal with it the way you want. There is no like necessarily wrong way. I would maybe, I don't know. But yeah, for anyone who wants to come on the show, hit us up. Our email is oplpodcast@gmail.com. Just send us your story and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram, TikTok for a bunch of clips, conversations around the episodes. That's at OPL Podcast. And you could support the show at patreon.com/OPL show. And that is it for this week.
See you guys next time.